Early April 1992. The ice had melted from the peaks of the northern ridges, but the black clay soil of the Oakridge Valley still held onto water like a sponge that had never been wrung out since winter began. The cold no longer cut like a blade, but the air hung heavy and damp, and along the western horizon, a band of blue-gray cloud was stacking itself, slow but certain. Jacob Miller stood at the edge of the southern pasture, where the small creek on Miller land ran toward Thomas Reed's property before continuing on. He said nothing. He only looked down at the trampled grass, where water had already begun to pool in small dark patches, mirroring the gray sky above. Hank stood at his left boot, ears up, nose pointed toward the creek. The old dog never took his eyes off the water, even though it moved slow and gentle, the way it always did. "Ground's full," Jacob said, low and slow, almost to himself. He crouched down, pressed 2 fingers into the soft earth. Water welled up around his fingers instantly. One more hard rain, and this won't hold. From the direction of the farmhouse, Ethan came walking with a leather clipboard under his arm and his Lufkin tape clipped to his belt. He'd just come from the county extension office, a topographic printout still in hand. "I checked the National Weather Service forecast, Dad," Ethan said, fast and bright, the way he always got when he had a number in front of him. Low-pressure system moving in from Nebraska. Combined with the snowmelt still coming off the ridges, they're calling for up to 3 inches of rain in 36 hours. Given how saturated this clay already is, the south pasture is going to flood. Jacob didn't turn right away. He looked at the creek a moment longer, then at the map in his son's hands. "I know," he said simply. "I already worked it out." Ethan pressed on, more excited now, like he'd been waiting for this. "If we lay a 6-inch PVC drainage line, bury it 2 feet down, run it along the lowest grade of the pasture straight off our property line, drainage speed goes up 4 times over natural sheet flow. I calculated the slope, the friction coefficient inside the pipe, peak flow capacity. It'll be finished before the storm gets here." Jacob stayed quiet. He walked along the edge of the creek, eyes tracing the natural slope of the land, where the grass grew thicker on one side and thinner on the other, the mark of hundreds of years of water choosing its own path. Hank followed close behind, never leaving his side. "Plastic pipe moves water fast," Jacob said finally, not sharp, not unkind. "Fast as it goes, it takes things with it. Soil, grass, whatever's holding the ground together." Ethan looked down at his printout, trying to hide a flicker of disappointment. But he didn't back off. "I'm not saying your way is wrong, Dad. I'm saying PVC is faster, more reliable. There's engineering data behind it. This isn't a guess." He flipped to the next page in his notebook, where he'd taped a photocopied data sheet from the extension office. Clay permeability rates, maximum design flow for a 6-inch pipe, a 2.5 times safety factor per state rural construction code. "I checked it 3 times, he said, talking faster now, as if speed could cover for the uncertainty underneath. "This isn't me guessing, Dad. This is how every modern farm in the county already does it." Jacob looked at the data sheet a long moment, not with scorn, but with real attention. He never dismissed his son's numbers. He just knew they didn't tell the whole story. "Your pipe does the math right for a sunny day," he said. "I worry about the day it stops being a pipe and starts being a choke point." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" "Branches, mud, loose rock washing down off the hill in a flood," Jacob said, still watching the creek. "Smaller the pipe, easier it clogs. Clog it in one spot, all the pressure goes there. A ditch doesn't have one spot to clog. Water spreads itself out, finds the open ground." Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked down at the numbers in his notebook, still correct, but for the first time he understood they were only correct under ideal conditions that the sky to the west had made no promise to follow. That evening, in Sarah's warm kitchen, an oil lamp threw soft shadows across the wooden walls, and the old blue enamel coffee pot still held a little warmth on the stove. Sarah paged through the family ledger, where she tracked the community's shared debts, seed, eggs, labor, while Ethan sat across from her, still holding the map like a shield. "I know Dad's going to do it his way," Ethan said, his voice softer now, no longer arguing, just honestly asking. "I just don't understand why we'd choose slower, when we've got something faster right in front of us." Sarah didn't answer right away. She poured a little more tea into Ethan's cup, set it gently in front of him. "You think fast water is water that's been dealt with?" she asked, light as a comment about the weather. "Or is it just water that's been moved somewhere else, to become someone else's problem?" Ethan opened his mouth to answer, then stopped. He looked down at the map, where his blue PVC line ran in a single straight shot off Miller Land, right at the boundary with Thomas Reed's. "I didn't think about that," he said finally, his voice much smaller. "I was only thinking about getting the water off our land." "I'm not blaming you," Sarah said, resting a hand on her son's shoulder for a moment. "You're young. You look at problems the way you were taught to look at them, clean, separate, with a start and an end. But the land here doesn't separate like that. Our creek is Thomas's creek too. The rain that falls on our field falls on the whole valley." She closed the ledger, tapped 2 fingers against the worn leather cover. "That's what I've been writing in this book for 30 years. Not who owes who money, but who's carried part of someone else's trouble." Ethan sat quiet a long while, watching the small flame dance behind the stove glass. Outside, the wind had begun to shift, carrying the cold, wet smell of the coming rain closer with every hour. The next morning, before the sky had fully lightened, Jacob took out his father's 1952 farm ledger and set it on the wooden table beside a steaming cup of coffee. He worked through the pages with a thumb roughened by decades of work, stopping at a faded handwritten entry with a simple hand-drawn diagram. Parallel curved lines following the contour of a slope, like the grain lines in a piece of wood. "Contour ditching," he read aloud, slow, like translating a language that had gone to sleep. "Don't dig straight down the slope. Dig along the natural lean of the land. Water slows down, spreads itself thin, and the ground keeps what it needs." Sarah, standing by the stove, glanced over his shoulder. "What year did your father write that?" 52, Jacob answered, after a spring flood that nearly took half the south pasture with it. He closed the ledger, stood, and pulled on his worn oilskin coat. He didn't use machines. He used his eyes, his back, and a mattock. At the Oakridge Feed and Supply, where the gravel lot always served as the county's unofficial meeting ground, word of the coming storm had already spread across the counter. Thomas Reed leaned against his gleaming GMC truck, a wooden toothpick tucked at the corner of his mouth, and laughed loud when he heard about Jacob's plan to dig by hand. "Jacob, old friend," Thomas said, booming, good-natured but doubtful all the same. "I just had a drainage system put in for my new retention pond. 3 days, done, proper engineering certificate, and everything. You're gonna dig dirt by hand with a storm coming? Time is money, Jacob." Jacob only nodded slightly, no argument in him. "Could be," he said. "But this ground doesn't always listen to a piece of paper." A few people near the counter laughed quietly, no malice in it, but clearly leaning Thomas's way. Ethan stood beside his father, silent, feeling the pull of both sides, Thomas's confidence in numbers and paperwork, and his father's quiet endurance. He looked down at the PVC map folder under his arm, then closed it, tucked it away. "I'll help you dig," Ethan said, surprising even himself. Jacob looked at his son a long moment, said nothing, only gave a small nod, a nod that, from Jacob, carried more weight than any compliment could. 4 days before the storm was due, Jacob and Ethan started the work. No excavator, no laser level, just a mattock, a square shovel, and a length of twine stretched along the contour line Jacob had marked by eye and by a simple clear tube water level. "Don't dig straight down the slope," Jacob explained, his voice keeping time with the mattock. "Dig level across. Water hits the ditch, it slows down, spills gently from one stretch to the next, instead of running straight in one rush." Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead, his palms already blistering though it was only mid-morning of the first day. "So hydraulically, we're increasing retention time to reduce surface flow velocity," he said, half explaining it to himself just to understand it better. "Call it what you want," Jacob answered, not looking up from the next strike of the mattock. By midday of the second day, both men's shirts were soaked through despite the cold, and Ethan had 2 new blisters alongside the calluses from the week before. He stopped, leaned on the shovel handle, breathing hard. "They don't teach this part in school," he said, half laughing, half serious. "School doesn't have Oakridge clay," Jacob said. They worked in near silence for hours, only the sound of the mattock and shovel, and now and then Jacob calling out to adjust a stretch of ditch that had drifted more than half an inch off level. A light rain came through at one point. They kept working, only pulling their hoods up higher. By the end of the second day, 5 of 7 planned stretches were finished, each one linked to the next by a short stretch of undisturbed ground. So water would spill from one level to the next instead of gathering into a single rushing line. More than once, Ethan paused, looking across toward Thomas Reed's land, where a work crew had already finished laying a gleaming length of PVC pipe in just 2 days. "That's fast," he murmured, still not stopping his own work. Jacob stopped, followed his son's gaze a moment. "Fast doesn't mean it lasts, Ethan," he said. "You've seen that before." He said nothing more, just went back to his own strike of the mattock. The late afternoon light stretched long across the field, and Hank lay still at the near edge of the ditch, eyes tracking every movement, nose lifting now and then to test the wind. By the end of the third day, the ditch system was nearly complete, but the first rain of the storm system had already begun to fall in a light scatter, and the western sky had turned the color of lead. Ethan straightened up, looking at the unfinished work, then at the first drops landing on the fresh calluses on the back of his hand. "Are we going to make it?" he asked, real worry in his voice for the first time. Jacob didn't answer right away. He looked at the sky, then at Hank, the dog standing now, ears fully up, eyes fixed on the clouds rolling together on the horizon. "Not finished," Jacob said, "but the ground understands what we're trying to do." That night, the storm broke in earnest. Rain didn't fall so much as pour, driven sideways in gusts that carried the last cold breath of the melting snow off the ridges into the rushing water below. Inside the house, Sarah stood at the window, arms folded into her wool coat, watching each flash of lightning light up the field. She wasn't panicked, she never was, but she lit a second lamp as a backup, laid dry towels near the door. Hank refused to leave the porch, curled tight against the doorframe, ears flattening with every roll of thunder. Jacob and Ethan went out for a final check by flashlight, rain suits plastered to their bodies in the wind. The creek had already risen fast, spilling over its banks in places, but when it reached the first line of ditches, the current slowed, spread gently over each level, breaking into smaller, weaker streams instead of driving forward as one mass. "It's slowing down," Ethan shouted over the rain, half amazed, half relieved. But from the direction of Thomas Reed's land, another sound rose, a straining pump motor, then a dull burst, and water surging out uncontrolled. Thomas's PVC line, buried deep but running in a single straight run, had jammed with branches and silt carried down by the heavy runoff from higher ground. The pressure built at one joint, and the joint gave way. Water tore loose, ripping open a stretch of earth around the pipe and dragging with it a section of paddock fence already weakened from the March freeze. By morning, the sky had cleared, leaving behind that clean, washed light that only comes after a big storm has passed. The Miller family south pasture was still wet, but standing, the shallow ditches held their shape, the water mostly drained away, leaving thin films of settled silt instead of gouged, eroded channels. The grass still gripped the soil. Nothing had collapsed. Nothing had washed away. On Thomas Reed's land, the scene was different. A deep scour hole around the burst pipe joint, mud spread wide, and a section of paddock fence lying flat across the sodden ground. Thomas stood there, hands on his hips, his cap soaked and drooping, the toothpick gone from the corner of his mouth. His work crew had arrived early, standing around the scour hole, scratching their heads, flipping through the pipe's engineering drawings as if the answer were hidden somewhere in the blue lines. One of them tried mixing extra concrete to reinforce the broken joint, but Thomas waved him off, the first time he'd done that in front of his own crew. Jacob walked over, Hank close at his heel, saying nothing at first, just standing beside Thomas, looking the same direction he was. Ethan followed a few steps behind, mud still dried on his hands from the work of the past 3 days. "My pipe had a proper engineering certificate," Thomas said, quieter than usual, none of his usual boom in it. "Certificate doesn't argue with a branch caught in a flood, Thomas," Jacob said, no mockery in it at all. "Water doesn't read paperwork. It just finds the path of least resistance." Thomas was quiet a long moment, looking across at the Miller field, where the line of ditches still held their shape calmly under the morning sun. "That ditch of yours," he said finally, some rare hesitation in his voice. "I want to see how you built it." Jacob nodded, Just once. Anytime you're free. Ethan stood watching, then looked down at his own hands. New calluses, dirt still under the nails. He thought of the PVC map folded in his clipboard, of the numbers he'd worked out carefully, correctly by every engineering measure, but missing the one thing no number could calculate: the ground doesn't care. Whether water moves fast or slow. It only cares whether the water is listened to. On the walk back, Ethan stopped at the edge of the first ditch, where water still seeped slowly through the gravel and broken slate. Clear now, not the muddy churn of the creek beyond. He crouched, cupped a handful, let it run through his fingers like sand. It doesn't stop the water, he said quietly, almost to himself. It just negotiates with it. Jacob, standing behind him, heard it and gave a small nod, a thin smile crossing his mouth, something rarely seen there. That's what your grandfather understood, that a lot of people forget now, he said. This ground isn't an enemy to beat. It's someone you have to learn to talk to. That afternoon, in the kitchen, Sarah quietly opened her ledger again, wrote a new line beside Thomas's canceled concrete debt from before, a note of a different kind of debt, not money, but a morning Thomas would come to learn the contour ditch method, a debt not yet paid. She closed the book, poured another cup of tea, set it beside Jacob's empty chair, the way she always did, every day, no matter what season passed. Outside the window, the afternoon light stretched long over the south pasture, where the ditches now looked like little more than gentle folds in the earth, almost invisible to anyone who didn't know they were there, but they had quietly decided the fate of an entire spring. Jacob came in, pulled off his boots at the door, the smell of wet earth and grass following him inside. He sat, lifted his cup, said nothing, just looked at Sarah a long moment, a look that carried more than any word of thanks could. Hank curled up under the table, finally letting himself relax, breathing slow and even, in time with the quiet rhythm of the house. Outside, the Oakridge Valley settled into a peaceful, damp, and steady evening, not because it had escaped the storm, but because it had learned to listen before the storm arrived.